Hello and welcome to Dialogue. Head of the secessionist Democratic Progressive Party, Ching-te, who won the island's election in January with only 40% of the vote, formally took office on Monday. As many question how Lai will handle cross-strait ties, analysts from both sides say the answer will be found in how China-U.S. relations evolve as competition between the two nations continue to rise. Could China and the U.S. be dragged into a full-blown conflict over Taiwan? What is the right relationship balance for the two major powers? And has the world entered a new Cold War? Join us for our discussion today from Beijing. I'm Xu Qinduo. Joining me today is Zhou Bo, Senior Fellow at the Center for International Security and Strategy at Tsinghua University, who has recently published an in-depth piece on China-U.S. relationship in Foreign Affairs magazine. Welcome to Dialogue, Zhou Bo. Let's start with Taiwan. You said Taiwan could be the only issue that could drag both China and the U.S. into a full-blown conflict. Explain to us why Taiwan here.
Because I always compare South China Sea with the Taiwan issue. Actually, in South China Sea, it isn't easier for China and the U.S. to have an accident because the ships and aircraft often get too close to one another. But it would not be as consequential as in the Taiwan Strait, because that is almost number one security issue for us. And we have laid down three conditions for applying non-peaceful means to resolve this issue. So should there be a conflict in the Taiwan Strait, it must have major consequences, and it cannot be small in scale.
So there's always a danger, a risk, let's say, in terms of security. Of course, you know, this week started with this swearing ceremony of the Taiwan leader, Lai Ching-te, who is known as a pragmatic worker for Taiwan independence. In his speech, of course, a lot of people they were watching his speech. He said basically, you know, Taiwan is a sovereign state, and of course, he didn't use the word like you know, independent state or you know, two Chinas, but he did say People's Republic of China and Republic of China, or the official name of Taiwan, they are not subordinate to each other. Basically, he is saying two states, two Chinas here.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
Well, actually, his remarks were not shocking to me, but still I feel surprised, because I basically believe he and his predecessor, Taiwan, are birds of the same feather. But I didn't expect actually he is so hell-bent, on confronting mainland. And this should not be the case, given that he didn't win the majority of public opinion, and his party basically is one seat short in the legislature. But I don't believe that he can do whatever he wants. Also, for what I said, there are two facts about this Taiwan issue. One is Taiwan will not move away. The second thing is time is on the side of mainland China.
What do you mean by say time is on the side of the mainland? Because many people would say the script of his speech obviously is already reviewed by Washington. Before he made it public there. So there's an endorsement. If we say this speech is quite provocative, but that was also made by Washington here.
Yeah, I mean, time is on the side of mainland because the mainland China, which is represented by People's Republic of China, is growing with strength. And right now we are the second largest economy, by GDP, but by PPP we're already the largest economy in the world. So in spite of some slowdown in our economy, but nobody doubts about the future of China. So we are moving still in the right direction. And if you compare this kind of strengths between mainland China and Taiwan, be it military or be it economic, be it political, there's no comparison at all. So, and as time goes on, this gap will simply become bigger and bigger. So I believe time is really on our side.
But at the same time, there's a U.S. factor, which is a big factor, let's say. The U.S. just passed an additional bill which will provide $8.12 billion to Taiwan to counter the mainland here. And also people say, at least in the West, they would often say, today is Ukraine, tomorrow Taiwan, obviously, and Lai Ching-te himself seems to be playing along with Washington's strategic containment of China. He said Taiwan is at the frontier of democracy here. Combine the factors here. Do you see that kind of a rising threat to the Chinese territorial integrity?
Actually, you have asked a number of most important questions. Well, for the United States, their policy, officially speaking, is one China. But we believe they are just hardly not this one China policy. And President Biden himself actually gulped for 4 times, talking about defending Taiwan. But he also talked about one China. So but even if this is a kind of a strategic ambiguity, there is nothing that is secretive about American intention to turn Taiwan into so-called POCUPY. So that is why you are saying, the United States actually speeding up selling arms to Taiwan, and also it now includes, sending people to train Taiwanese soldiers. So actually, it's already a further effort. Yeah.
Okay, tell us what's the U.S. goal, for the situation across the Taiwan Strait. Let's say the U.S. previously, at least, they have this one China policy here. They say maintain strategic ambiguity. They have also Taiwan Relations Act there. They say that serves their interests. But increasingly, there are strategic thinkers in Washington calling for clarification of this one China policy, because people would say they are trying to abandon or appear to abandon this one China policy. What is the ultimate goal of them in terms of security in this region?
This kind of policy actually has changed a bit, starting with a kind of a suggestion by Richard Haass, who suggested that the United States should actually turn its policy from strategic ambiguity to strategic clarity. That is to make clear that the United States would defend Taiwan. But this kind of policy still is not accepted as official policy, because why Richard Haass would make such a suggestion? Because when the United States, I believe in its own strength, that it was strong, so okay, we can afford to be ambiguous on this point. But the same mainland China becoming stronger and stronger, they are afraid that probably mainland China would become what they believe to be more provocative. So therefore, they want to, declare that they would defend Taiwan in a clear-cut manner. But this is just a kind of academic proposal which is not accepted by the Biden administration, because some other scholars could counter-argue that if you make it clear, probably that will actually promote the Chinese mainland more. Yeah, in that direction.
In the United States, at least, some people would say, today's Ukraine, tomorrow's Taiwan. What's the similarities? What are the differences between the two situations?
Well, the difference is very clear, because Ukraine is an independent sovereign state, while more than 180 countries in the world agree that Taiwan is part of China, right? Then about Ukraine, well, this issue is certainly in part driven by NATO expansion. I would say in part, right? Even if it may not be totally driven by this issue, because Russia would also, think about their own spheres of influence. But when it comes to Taiwan, this is not about the question of sphere of influence. This is about, Taiwan being part of China, which is universally recognized. So, but what I need to say is that, in spite of the fact that Taiwan is not united with mainland China, the Chinese government has never declared a timetable for reunification. Yeah, so the 3 conditions are basically the worst scenarios in which we have to use force. But I believe so far the Chinese government is still having patience, because even after he was elected, from all the official remarks by the Chinese government, by Chinese leaders, we are still talking about peaceful reunification. So there is a fundamental question. So with the growth of strength of People's Republic of China, so would this kind of confidence, would this lead to confidence, or would this lead to impatience, right? I believe, this growth of strength would actually make us more confident about eventual peaceful reunification. It won't necessarily make us more impatient that we have to use force.
So still, Taiwan would be more dangerous. People would say, in particular, if the new administration in Taiwan, like Ching-te, if he continues to take a bold stance in terms of like two states, in terms of Taiwan independence, do you think that it will pose more dangers, more challenges to the security situation across the straits?
I think we have to wait and see. And I believe the United States is also adopting this attitude, wait and see, although they are, actually behind Taiwan. I believe what they said would be decisive to Taiwan. If they want to put Lai Ching-te under control, they definitely have all means to put him under control. So this probably is against the bigger picture of China-U.S. Rivalry or competition. So this picture is still unfolding. We don't know.
Of course, for the mainland, if you follow the U.S. doctrine, is that you need to be powerful, because peace comes from strength, in particular military strength. Do you agree?
I think in a way, yes. If you're talking about the military strength, certainly the PLA is growing with strength. Yeah. If we, the Taiwanese military is not comparable at all to the PLA, but if we compare PLA with the U.S. military, I would say, globally speaking, the U.S. military is still much stronger than the PLA, but we have no ambition, overseas, except to perform some humanitarian operations. But in the Western Pacific, along the first chain of island, I believe it is fair for me to say, as agreed by many, experts, the gap between Chinese and American military is shrinking, to the advantage of mainland China, because we have a lot of advantages. Because first of all, it is closer to us, so therefore we could have adequate logistic supply, sufficient intelligence, gathering, so on and so forth. And in terms of, firepower, right now PLA is getting stronger and stronger. All these are not secrets. So I believe time is really on our side.
We'll stick to Taiwan question here. Of course, there's election in Washington upcoming. In the United States, Donald Trump could well come back to the White House. Will his China policy any different from Biden, in particular, over Taiwan?
Actually, we won't know that. But my personal assessment is that the second term, a potential second term of Donald Trump, probably would be very much like, Biden administration. Why do I say that? Because Biden, in the beginning, was quite friendly towards China, but the first term of Donald Trump has actually created something that he himself did not expect. That is kind of bipartisan consensus against China. This consensus is ideological, although President Trump was a businessman turned president. So his legacy actually has President Biden handicapped. So he has to follow Donald Trump's, legacy of this kind of ideological, animosity towards China. But then, if Donald Trump comes in, so what is the room for him to maneuver? I believe the room for him to maneuver is also small, because Biden has tried his best to have this kind of a small yard, a high fence, and of course, when it comes to President Trump again, then he of course will just go further down the road. The only difference is whether he would really, add a tax to all the Chinese products, to 60%, as he has sworn. Nobody knows that. But I think it is important for the United States to pay, special attention, not to, let something happen. For example, like Nancy Pelosi's visit, for example, we are not so naive. We are not so naive to believe that Joe Biden could not call her to stop this visit. It was even mentioned in Washington Post. that Nancy Pelosi said, if Biden called him, he could stop this visit. Yeah.
Biden didn't.
But he didn't.
In your this analysis in foreign affairs, you mentioned this interesting concept, basically trust but talk. Many would say there's a lack of political trust between Beijing and Washington, and that's a major challenge probably for the bilateral relationship. So we are seeing quite frequent meetings between senior leaders, between the national leaders, but the progress is sort of like disappointing, let's say, to a lot of people. Trust but talk. Usually people would say, trust but verify. Tell us, where is this from?
The old Cold War slogan is trust but verify. That means basically I don't trust you. So let's verify, and then through verification, I can have some trust in you. Yeah, but this is between two enemies, right? So my conclusion is somewhat different from most people who believe how important the trust must be. Therefore, it is a precondition. I think it is important, but it's not a precondition. Why? Because the lessons learned from the Cold War tells us exactly even enemies could have cooperation when necessary, because the United States and the Soviet Union had cooperation in making joint efforts in eradicating smallpox. Yeah. And it is through these joint efforts. So we do not have smallpox in human history. And they also made the peaceful joint exploration of outer space. And China and the United States are not even enemies. So theoretically, even, we have more room for cooperation. So this is what I've suggested. Trust but talk. Even if we do not have trust, we must talk to one another. And in fact, I don't believe that the two countries at the highest level or at the senior military level, have talked, as frequently as the enemies did during the Cold War. So we need to talk to one another, and this has to be institutionalized, and this has to be regularized.
One factor probably people would cite for the lack of trust is, for the U.S., it seems quite clear they want to maintain this hegemony or whatever you call it, preeminent position around the world. And there's a anxiety or there's a concern that China is rising fast. China could replace the U.S. to become number one. That's something unacceptable to Washington. What can China do? I mean, China has to grow that's, the right for any nation to develop itself.
I believe this has something to do with Americans' self-perception that is characterized with a kind of a narcissism, because the United States has described itself, as an indispensable nation. That is a very word of Madeleine Albright. And the United States has described itself as a city upon the hill, right? So, but I believe when this kind of a narcissism, met with reality, yeah, and then this kind of narcissism was somewhat dashed. So the United States felt frustrated, and then they start to look for enemies. Then, is China necessarily, even a competitor? For example, liberal democracy has been in steady decline for the last 17 years. Yeah, according to Freedom House, that is a watchdog of democracy in the United States. So, has this anything to do with China? It has nothing to do with China, right? China is not promoting socialism or communism overseas. China is not exporting this ideology. Yeah. So why has liberal democracy be in steady decline? This is my question. But whatever the answer, it has nothing to do with China. So I believe the United States really has this kind of tradition of looking for an enemy, and it has wrongfully, believed that China and probably Russia, are the very reasons. Yeah. So I don't believe it is justifiable. Yeah.
Along with China-U.S. relationship, of course, there is a concern in the West about the close relationship between China and Russia, not only over Ukraine issue, but also the long-term, big power competition. They say if the U.S. is pursuing a new Cold War, basically by continuing both China and Russia, and the ideal situation for them is to drive a wedge between Beijing and Moscow. Now, given the state of the relationship between Beijing and Moscow, it seems that's impossible for them. How do you look at China-Russia relationship versus, of course, their relationship with the U.S.?
Okay, on China-Russian relationship, the concern of the West basically are on two major points. The first is so-called unlimited friendship. The second is China providing what they call dual-use technology or dual-use products, to Russia right now. Talking about the so-called unlimited friendship, my answer is very, very simple. This is exactly what I said, during the interview given by Financial Times. If I say I want to develop a good relationship with you, and then say, hold on for a moment, this relationship has to be limited.
We should set a limit?
It has to be limited in the first place. Won't you feel very much surprised? Yeah, it's strange, right? So people always quote this term, but they did not mention in the same paragraph, in the same joint statement, China and Russia have made it quite clear that this is not allies against any third parties. Why don't people quote that? And then coming to this kind of a dual-use technology or dual-use products. For example, gas and diesel. When I mention these two words, you won't think of anything that are particularly important. But this kind of products, once put into a military truck, can become a kind of military product, right? So this kind of dual-use nature is there, but if it has this kind of a dual-use nature, then you have to assume first it's for civilian use. You can't assume that it is in the first place for military use. So China and Russia are largest neighbor toward each other, and we have normal trading. China also wants to, export our products because the Chinese economy needs that. So what is wrong with that?
But at the same time, of course, what we are seeing is the U.S., let's say, maneuvers, U.S. moves, whatever you call it, and people would say contain the China in terms of security. For example, you have Quad in Asia, right? India, Japan, Australia, U.S., and AUKUS, U.S., Britain, and Australia. Now they are talking about bringing on New Zealand over there. Are you concerned with the development of such military alliance, basically?
Let's talk about it separately. If you look at the Quad, there is a military element in Quad that is only in a military exercise called the Malabar exercise. And nothing goes much beyond that. And because of India, which is not an ally of the other three countries, so Quad so far is not a military alliance. And I don't believe, precisely because of India, it will become a military alliance. Then AUKUS certainly is a kind of alliance among three allies. But then the question is, how important can this kind of a mechanism become? Because I once thought about one question. Americans say that they have over 60 allies and partners, which is true. But then, if in the worst scenario of having a direct conflict with China, how many American allies are really countable? Japan might just stand in the, at the forefront because it has a treaty obligation to provide American, forces with logistic supply. It might provide, American troops with bases. But when it comes to a direct, conflict with China, the Japanese public opinion is against that. And then when it comes to the second country, probably Australia, government has made it clear that we, yes, want to buy the nuclear-powered submarines, but it's not for exchange of a role in the Taiwan Strait. They have made it quite clear about that. So all these countries basically have their own conditions, which you won't know whether they have you won't know until last minute what the real attitude is. So I don't believe that the United States can actually come up with all its allies against China. Maybe it wants, and this is why President Biden is, stressing alliance as never before. Trump's policy is American first, and according to Richard Haas, Biden's policy is very much like allies first. But why allies first? Because American strength is no longer as strong as before. So therefore, it has to attach great importance to the assistance from allies. But if we are talking about a war with China, so I really have serious doubt how useful this kind of support from allies would become.
Mm-hmm. Well, in a sense, the Ukraine conflict can be seen as a proxy war. Some U.S. officials talked about it publicly. The purpose is to weaken Russia because Russia is a rebel. And if they can achieve this goal of, let's say, Russian disintegration, breaking into small states, that would be ideal for some of the Western leaders. They talked about it publicly. Are you concerned about the possibility there will be a proxy war in Asia against China, either through, Taiwan island or through the Philippines, for example, in the South China Sea? Philippines has been pretty provocative toward the Chinese side.
Well, I think Philippines is a very interesting country because the United States certainly has tried, to sweet talk the Philippines in opening 9 bases. Yeah, that could be extremely useful. Yeah, for the United States to strengthen its forward military presence. Yeah, in a worst scenario. Yeah, then. The question is, why would the Philippines government do that? I have no clear idea, but what I know is that they actually have also laid down some conditions for the United States to make use of these bases. For example, they cannot store ammunition there. For example, they cannot use these bases to launch attacks. But of course, these kind of conditions could also change, if this relationship between China and the Philippines start to change. Yeah. So talking about the Philippines, I think we have come to this issue, of the stranded, rusted military ship. In the Jiao, or what it is internationally known as the second Thomas Show, right? So I don't believe that we're going to attack them militarily, because this is already made quite clear by our spokesman from the Ministry of Defense, from Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So long as they only provide food, water, and this kind of things to the mariners on board the ship, it's okay for us. But they just cannot, send the building materials to the ship to have it fortified. That is not allowed. So I believe, given the overwhelming strength on the Chinese side, we can actually resolve this issue. Probably the best way to resolve this issue is to let Mother Nature to resolve this issue with her so-called the force majeure. So one day it will be gone.
It will be gone. Well, on that tone, we are coming to the end for today's discussion. Many thanks to Zhou Bo. You can also find us on the CGTN app or on YouTube. I'm Ching-te. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.